we could jump straight into it. So I want to get a little bit of background. So for people that are listening who don't know who you are, just like a brief kind of your journey. I know you've been doing Android for like at least 10 years now. It seems like you kind of started around the same time that I started actually, but it seems like you kind of did the opposite where you went from working to going independent, and I went from going independent to working. So can you give like just a brief kind of overview of, you know, kind of like your journey into development?
Mm-hmm. I started working with Android and working at a company basically at 2012. And I've been working both professionally and on my own projects since then. I've worked on multiple different projects, like different fields whatsoever. For example, I started working with building SMS clients. Then later on, when I went to the UK for my master's in human-computer interaction, I ended up moving to London, where I started working at a product agency, where we would do all sorts of different products. So I worked on magazines, TV, betting apps as well. So there's a lot of different spectrum of applications that I worked on. And later on, I worked on Shazam, the music recognition app, which is more about artists and music
nice.
In the music industry, basically. Overall, even though I absolutely love development, I love other things as well. Like I love designing as well. I worked as a product designer for a year as well, and my master was more into design and the human aspect of technology. I realized that I like a lot of different things, basically. And I realized that the more further up you go into the career ladder, the more specialized you need to become, the more specific stuff you do as well. And when I realized that, like I always knew, of course, but when you start growing, becoming more serious about it, then I realized that, you know, don't think I'm becoming happier out of this, you know? So one thing led to another, the pandemic as well. And here we are trying out my own things now.
Okay, nice. All right. So I want to backtrack a little bit because I want to talk to you. I know you have a blog post. I think it was I've got the title of it here somewhere, Happiness Over Profit. So I definitely want to talk about that. But just before we get to that, so I know that you worked at a bunch of companies. You worked at Shazam. What was the last like quote unquote professional proper job developer company that you worked for?
That was for Shazam. That was 1 year ago.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So the reason I asked that is because I know on your Twitter it says ex-Apple. So I kind of wanted to just very briefly dive into like what that experience was like. Because personally, I worked for a lot of like startups and like corporates, but in terms of big tech, I have zero experience of what that kind of thing is like. And I think a lot of listeners do as well. Yeah.
So for those that are not aware, and I get that kind of a lot, Shazam is owned by Apple. They used to have, I think, a very good relationship for years and years, and eventually it got acquired by them. Overall, it is how you would expect like any software company to be. I'm not going to talk specifics, but more of an overview. I think overall throughout my career, it was the best project I've worked with, I've worked on, the best people I've worked with, best salary, bonuses, perks, and all this kind of stuff. But in the end of the day, you still have what I mentioned earlier, that, when you're hired as a developer, you're going to be asked to do, developer specific things. Even though that part of me absolutely loves it, I have other things that I enjoy doing as well. I love designing, talking to people, trying to find out what works with them, what doesn't work with them, and so on, so on. So it felt many times very limiting to me.
Yeah. Okay. That totally makes sense. And the Shazam being owned by Apple makes sense because when I read Apple and then I saw that you're an Android developer, I was like, well, I don't know any app. I'm sure there are, but I was like, I don't know any Apple apps that are on Android. So that totally makes sense. Okay, cool. So leaving that, what was the kind of decision? I know you said developers do development stuff. You want to do other stuff, but was there like a a moment that you were like, I need to stop this and do something else? And did you know what the else was that you were going to go into, or did you just decide that you wanted to do more and you were going to leave and figure it out?
It was more into the, having this feeling that, I don't think this is going to get better. It is nothing about the company or the occupation, I would say. It's more of a personal decision. And even though I didn't know what I would be doing next, I was trying to kind of, let's just say that I do this thing to myself. When I want to do something, I kind of try to push myself, remove every kind of excuse that I have for myself, to kind of push myself into the place, like corner myself into the place that I want to be. So one kind of issue or weird phobia, I don't know, however you want to call it, for doing this transition was, I cannot leave my well-paying job. I cannot leave this. I'm going to starve, man. I'm not going to have anything to eat, and I'm going to go poor or whatever. Yeah. It's mental. It's not true. Like, if you are conscious about your spendings and, you understand how much money you spend in a monthly or yearly basis, you can do some basic math and see how many years you can, basically do nothing. I understand that, I'm incredibly lucky to be in a position that I can, not work, basically not have any income, and for a few years I can experiment with things. But if you do have this opportunity and that's what you want to try it out, there's nothing else stopping you, right? So, it didn't, again, it was not something happen at the job and I'm like, okay, that's it, I'm done. But it was more of a, it kind of starts building up. Like, over the years, I also had this thought in my head, how cool would it be if I were to do my own apps, for example, get paid for that? So over the years, it builds up, and at some point, you're like, okay, I think it's now or never kind of thing.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that totally makes sense to me. And I want to dive into some of the stuff that you did. Because I know, so I didn't know that you had a blog until I was like doing a bit of research for this podcast. And then I started reading your blog, which is actually really good. I'll link it up in the show notes. People can go and read it. Super interesting stuff. But something that I wanted to touch on before we get to that, or I guess the question is for you is, so this idea of like happiness over profit, did that happen before or after you left?
It was before, but was much quieter than it is now.
Okay.
As in, it's not one of those things that you get out of bed one day and you're like, what would be cool? Just quit my job and do my own thing and just do it. It doesn't really work like that. At least not for me. I don't know for other people. But it's like you have those. No, I cannot speak for everyone. I have, those things, those thoughts, like how would I want my life to be? How the ideal life would look like. By the way, I don't know yet. I'm still trying to figure this out. But I know which parts I want to get rid of, and I know which ones, some of the things that make me happier, make me want to get out of bed, being more excited that I'm going to be doing XYZ, for example. I want to be doing more of those instead of just being paid well. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, it totally makes sense, because I think like I have a similar philosophy, which is I don't like to do things that I don't like. It's like I don't like to take roles just because they're going to pay money, but I'm going to hate it for the 6 months that I work there. And I know a lot of people that are in roles that, they pay really well, but they don't like it. And it's like, there has to be a balance somewhere, because what's the point of making all this money and being unhappy at the same time? And then obviously there's no point being super happy and broke, because then I imagine a lot of people wouldn't enjoy that either. So you got to find the balance. Yeah. But I just thought it was really interesting, because I haven't seen any developers kind of speak about that before. It just caught my attention.
I think that was also part of the reason why I want to be a bit more, open about this. Because the more, every time that I would talk to people and friends and family about, hey, you know what? I'm thinking more about the things that I want to be doing instead of how things are supposed to be, if that makes sense. It's like you have this framework, like get out of university, actually live your life, go school, university, get a good job, grow up the career ladder, get married, the usual stuff. And I'm like,
Sure. Yeah.
Sure, that sounds like a good framework for life. I'm sure it works for many, many people. But what if it doesn't really work for me? Like, what if I want to try out to see what works, extremely well for my case? And that's what I've been exploring now.
Yeah.
Even though there are people talking about this, like, there are books about lifestyle design and so on, at least where I'm from, it's not very common to talk about those things. Hence the blog, writing about my experiences, basically.
Yeah, I totally get it. I mean, I think I've even read some of those, those books, but I feel like the people that find those books are the people that are already thinking about that stuff. And the people that have no concept of this, they don't find it unless, they stumble across your blog post or they listen to this podcast and they'll be like, oh, what is that? What are they talking about? Kind of thing. So yeah, that's what I always find really interesting. But okay, so we can move on a little bit. So you've quit your quote unquote, proper job, and you've decided you want to do indie stuff, right? And like, I read the posts that you wrote on it. I thought they were super interesting. I had similar experiences, but kind of just, I guess if you could go through kind of not so much the ideas, but like the good and the bad, because obviously you made this decision. I don't know if that first 6 months or how long is it since you quit your job now? It's less than a year, right? Still, or no?
It's less than a year. It should be around 9 months now, I think. It was since August.
All right. So I guess the question is, okay, gotcha. So I guess the question is it what you thought it would be, and kind of what have been the pros and the cons and like the things that you've learned doing it so far?
So I can definitely say that it is absolutely nothing that I was expecting it to be. To be honest, I didn't have much expectation, but as in the target, how exactly life would be. But the process of it, I was not expecting it at all. For example, while building your own products, there are always this kind of ups and downs, mental, emotional up and downs, where sometimes you feel like, I'm into something, I'm building this and people will love it. And then you get stuck on something for a good period of time and you're like, oh my God, this is horrible. Why did I even, consider doing this, what I'm doing and so on. And you kind of need to control that. Like in the very beginning, for me, it was a roller coaster, man. Like, I remember just being stuck at my place, working, coding, and not being happy at all because I'm like, where am I going with this? And one of the main things that you kind of come across, you need to figure out soon, in my opinion, is, if you're independent, you're not just a developer anymore, because it's not as if you have clean tasks that you need to figure out and just do them, right? You need to figure out what is the thing that people will value the most, for example, and build that.
Yeah.
High chances are you're not going to get it right the first time. So it gets down to trying to narrow it down to a point that you can ship it very quickly, see what people think, and iterate, basically. That takes a little while to get used to that. But yeah, other than that, for example, you need to figure out how to get people, it's not just building the thing, but also marketing it, right? That is not something that they teach you while being a developer, right? So you have to figure out ways, trying to find out who you're building for, what do they like, what they want to talk about, and so on. And also how to reach them. So it's a whole, it's an interesting journey, I would say.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I can relate to most of that, because it is like the development part for us and people listening is easy because we're all developers. It's the rest. It's like, there's no point building this great thing. No one's going to use it because they don't know about it. So you have to learn marketing and all that kind of stuff. But what would you say is, like, out of the things that you've done so far, and I know what they are. So if you want to shout them out, that's totally up to you. But I was going to say, like, are there any things that you definitely would say, I did this wrong and I would do it differently in the future? And then on the other side of that, are there things that you're like, my next project, I'm definitely going to do this because I feel like this is the way to do things?
Absolutely. Yes. So the very first thing that I built that I think was a good idea, but it didn't really get anywhere, was a SaaS, a website basically where you would, for people that have podcasts or any audio related files for their businesses, they would upload the files and I would create a short video clip for them, like to have transcripts at the bottom of the page and have an audiogram and so on. Even though people were really excited about the idea and I did have regular hits, I didn't want to make any money for it, basically. And I think that the problem there was two things. The one is I wasn't quite sure, or I wasn't quite ready, or I didn't have the understanding yet of how to monetize things. I thought you build something, you build a great product, and that's it. And everything else would come naturally. It's not like that at all. So two things about that is to first figure out how to talk to the people, to understand who is going to use that first. Because on paper, what I just said, it's very, very broad. Who in reality is going to use this instead of, I'm building this website that converts your audio files into video? Like, it's much easier to figure out a niche, basically, and try to talk to them, get to their community. Now, with the internet, you can reach basically anywhere in the planet, or the target audience, at least. So it's a no-brainer to try talking to people first. Go on Reddit, see what they're discussing about, what the problems are, try to reach out to them as well, and then start building. Or try to build something so small to get some first users, build some connections there, and see how it goes on. So and about this, I realized that, all these years that I've been working, basically, it's not that I was also part of the Android community a lot. Like, I was writing blog posts. I like hanging out with people as well. So I realized that, that communities are people that I genuinely care about. I know them. I know how, information travels, let's say, around the communities, the places people hang out and so on. So I'm like, it would make way more sense for me to build something, valuable for those people instead of trying to get into a new community all from scratch, basically, and make myself known there. So my new take on this is trying to find out a place where you actually hang out already and you know people, and start to build out things for them. So far, it seems like it's working, so I'm pleased.
Yeah, no, it seems like it's going great. So I have a couple of questions on that, because I know you released like a framework. I think it's like a framework library for contacts. And then I saw that you did a project, which is essentially you built like let me get it up because I don't want to misdescribe it, but it was essentially, there we go, the Compose starter kit. So it's like a project that shows you all the things about Compose that you've done, I think using the contacts library. And it's kind of, I found it really interesting because a lot of people do this sort of stuff where, I built something, here you go, it's open source, this is best practices and stuff. And you didn't do that. You made it a paid product, which I think is really interesting because I've not seen anybody, and maybe I've just missed it, take a project and make it a paid product as essentially like a tutorial resource, right? So instead of buying a tutorial, I can buy this thing, I can look through the code, I can see how it works, I can see the best practices and all that kind of stuff. So where did you get that idea to do that from? Or was it just by chance? Because I definitely haven't seen anyone else do that.
It was completely by chance. As in, I remember ages ago I wanted to build a contacts app, and I realized how bad the contacts API on Android was. So I ended up more or less abandoning the idea for building a contacts app. And a few months later on, while I was this up and down, as I was saying earlier, the emotional roller coaster I was in, I needed something that I knew to keep me happy, basically. The closest thing to that would be a side project, basically, that you build something for yourself, something that makes you happy. So I ended up doing that. And instead of building the contacts app, I ended up building the library for contacts. I open sourced it, people liked it, and I'm like, okay, this feels nice, basically, but I didn't really give much thought to it. I kept adding more features as a side project because, I was interested in the project. And later on, I came with the idea of, Compose is kind of new and people seem to be very excited about it. Why don't I try to build a Compose app using the API that I also enjoy using? It's so nicely done at that point. And try to put the price on it to see what would happen, basically. And that's how it happened.
Okay, nice. All right. So would I be right in saying that, because I went on the website and you did this interesting thing where it's like, the first, I don't know the numbers exactly, but the first 10 people that buy it get for this price, then the price goes up, and then the next 10 people until it gets to like a price that you would expect that sort of thing to sell for. Were all your sales so far primarily through Twitter, or were they through other avenues?
No, it's mostly Twitter. I'm still trying to explore other ways for traffic. But I would say traffic, Twitter is the number one source of traffic for my stuff for the time being.
Nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a really good way to leverage it. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. And for people listening, I'll link up the library and I'll link up the project in the show notes if they want to go and check it out. And then I want to move on a little bit. So you did all that stuff, and then now you have a book coming out. I think it's coming out because it's still pre-orders, right? Which is going essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea is to take an Android developer that understands, the regular views in XML and stuff to Compose.
Yes.
Okay. So my question on that is kind of, when did you have that idea and what has that process been like? Because, so I want to I don't want to jump into Compose yet because I have questions about that separately, but just kind of in terms of the book, like when did you get the idea this is a project? Because I imagine when you left the job to go and be an indie developer, I would think that you weren't like, I'm going to leave this to go and write a book. So how did that kind of come about?
So it's kind of a funny story because I was out with a friend having coffee, and we're talking about indie development, doing your own thing. And at some point we talked about Compose. And this friend of mine kind of brought up you know what, it's so annoying how there is no such thing like to know how to do things from Vue to Compose straight away. And I have to go through everything basically to understand how to do the most basic things.
Yeah.
And that kind of like, I kept thinking about it over and over again. And then I realized how, basically when someone, including me, when I was learning how to use Compose, I would search, the web, go to Stack Overflow, go through different comments. One would be outdated. I would have to go to the next one, search on blog posts and so on. So I'm like, okay, how about I write a blog post? I wouldn't want to start writing a book just to see, straight away if people would get it or not. So how about I write a simple blog post, do a very basic introduction to Compose, like, you know how to use views. Here's how to understand, to get a basic idea how to set up Compose basically in your project, and how to do the most basic things in Compose. So I wrote that, and I did a Twitter thread as well, and people seem to like it a lot. Like, to my standards, it went kind of viral in the community, like 500, 600 plus likes, retweets, and so on. So even though, with the knowledge that I have now, I wouldn't say that, this is a clear sign that you are going to make money out of it. I'm like, there's definitely some interest there. So I started exploring a bit further, and I'm like, okay, so this keeps going on and on. And I remember doing a tweet saying, if we manage to get 2,000 followers on Twitter, I'm going to write a book about it. And people kept following more and more and more, to the point we got very, very close. Like, I think I was like, until on Friday, if we manage to do this, I'll write a book. And we didn't get to 2,000, but we got very close. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it anyway and see what happens. So the next days, I created the pre-order of the book. And I had many people actually pre-ordering the book. I'm like, well, to me, that's a good indication that, I should do this no matter what happens. I don't care. Yeah. I'm not aiming, to make a huge profit out of the book, but it's more, I see it as an education, trying to find out basically how the whole selling products work, basically. So I see it as a very good exercise. Yeah. So far it has been going pretty good. The book keeps getting pre-orders every few days. And I'm very close to getting the last part done and then move on with the next projects. It's a learning experience.
Yeah, that sounds really good. So I definitely have had the same experience as you. So I've literally, I think yesterday as we're recording this, properly sat down to start learning Compose because like doing the contracting and stuff that I do, like nobody's using Compose, right? So I never had to know it. And I feel like now it's starting to catch up. So I need to start learning it and I have the time. But I always, when I've looked at it before, you know, I've watched the videos on YouTube that Google puts out and stuff. And I always found it really annoying that they give you all these new concepts, but they don't tell you like, right, if you want like a horizontal linear layout, this is kind of the equivalent. If you want a recycler view, this is kind of the equivalent. So it is really difficult to be like, I can knock up this layout in 5 minutes. And now it's going to take me an hour just because I don't even know the terms that I'm supposed to use. So I think a resource like that, definitely, that's something that I've been lacking. But I wanted to get a little bit about, and just like super briefly, what the kind of, not the writing process is, but like, what's the process of going from writing this stuff out to actually having a published book?
Keep in mind that it is a self-published book. Like for the time being, everything is through generating it on through, you know, tools on my machine, creating a PDF and then publishing on a site called Gumroad. So basically, the process is, in the very beginning, I created a table of content to understand whether it resonates with people, whether it makes sense, you know, for someone to purchase a book that has this sort of information. And in the very beginning, I wrote the first chapter, which was about text, and I basically gave it away for free. If you go on the website, you're going to see the actual first chapter. And that helped me, you know, do a little bit of user research to understand whether, you know, I personally think if I had this, that would have helped me a lot. But it's not what I want or what I need. It's about what other people want and need. So I created the first version of that and I gave it to a few people and they absolutely loved it. Like, oh my God, this is amazing. First of all, it's, you know, mapping one-to-one how text view works and how text in Compose works. And also, it's very on to the point. I'm trying to write as little text as possible. It's literally, if you check the table of content, it's like, how do you use custom fonts? How do you use custom fonts? And below that, I'm giving you very little information about any sort of theory, like one-liner that you need to know. Like, get the font files into your resources. That's how you read them, and that's how you use them. And that's it. So you can basically copy-paste the thing. Also, the PDF makes it very, you know, straightforward to copy-paste. That's about it. I think that the book itself as a format is kind of a lie. It's better to see it as a resource where, you know, all the information that you need to do the job, to get the job done is in one place instead of looking at it as a book that you need to go through, you know, read on your sofa and so on. It's more of a companion to your development time, basically.
Yeah.
So I gave the first chapter out there. I got some feedback, and after that, I kept writing. And every now and then, I share some updates on Twitter. Again, get feedback from people. Maybe some people like something, maybe they don't. Move on with the next one.
Okay. All right. That totally makes sense. And then just on a side note, because this is interesting to me, is why a book and not like a Udemy course? And do you have any plans to kind of make it into like a Udemy course or something like that?
So it is a book because I always go with the simplest approach I can. Meaning, if I were to do a Udemy course, it means that I would have to understand what Udemy, how it works as a whole. So instead of that, because I do have a lot of experience writing blog posts, to me, writing feels kind of like a very straightforward thing to do. I know how to use Markdown as well. I know how to format code and how people would read this as, let's say that I understand the medium. Yeah. So it was much more comfortable for me to create this book instead of trying out different medium that I'm not aware of. And also, in the end of the day, what's more important for me is to understand how to create something, find the audience and sell it instead of creating, training courses, for example. I believe Udemy is for video courses, isn't it?
Yes, it's basically, if you were going to take your book and put it on Udemy, it would basically be a video of you reading a chapter with some screenshots of the code or something. It's kind of like a lecture in that kind of sense, but I imagine for you, like, you could easily do like 5-10 minute videos, like super short, for people to loop through. That's my experience of it. I've bought a few Udemy courses, but I know a lot of developers, when they are trying to teach something, they always go to like Udemy or video courses on YouTube, or they self-publish and stuff. I don't know that many, again, that do a book, so it's quite unique that you chose to go that direction. But the fact that you essentially stick to what you know is the fastest way to get it done. So that totally makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. I did try experimenting with video a bit. Like, I did some very short clips, literally taking content of the book and turning them into a very short screencast, like 2 minutes tops.
Yeah.
And saying, this is how to do, how to use custom fonts in Compose. You do this, you do that, blah, blah, blah. And people, again, seem to like it on Twitter. Yeah. So I think that more of those are going to be coming as soon as I finish the book, because it's taking a lot of my energy. So as soon as that is done, I think I'm going to focus more into short screencasts for Compose. But Udemy courses, I'm not sure. Okay. We'll see. It's one more tool in the whole, one of the things that you can do online these days, right? Which are a lot of different options.
Yeah, it's just... Yeah, I was going to say, it's just an option that's available to you. So that doesn't mean that's the direction you have to go. Cool. All right. So that's kind of, I have a couple of questions left, and then we can wrap. And then if there's anything else you want to talk about, then feel free. But I guess kind of before we wrap, a question that I like to ask everybody, and this is, so I'm recording right now, this is for season 3, and this will probably be like episode 2, and I haven't recorded anything for like 4 months. So I'm going to pull up the question, because I like to ask it the same to everybody, and right now it's just blank in my mind. So let me just pull it up 1 second. I got it. Okay, cool. Because otherwise people are going to be listening to this and they're like, he doesn't normally ask that question. So the question is, what do you think, in your opinion, separates a good developer or an okay developer from a great developer?
I would say that everyone can become a developer. As in, technically speaking, for becoming a developer, you need to be able to develop apps, software, like to know the technical things and build a solution to them. A great developer, on the other hand, is the person that can work great with other people and actually understands that, we are a team, we're heading towards a common goal. And if we have a disagreement on something, it doesn't mean because, I don't like you personally, or I don't like the opinion that you have, your solution, but it's because I believe that this is the best approach. Let's discuss and come into, the best solution that we can get, so that we can get closer to the end goal that we have. I think that a lot of people see development as a very technical occupation, but in reality, I think I would say it's a very social one, because unless you know how to coordinate and work with other people, then you're not really going to get far, even if those are other developers, designers, product people, and so on. So that's the distinction in my mind. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I would 100% agree with that. And I would just add to that the people that I have worked with that I would consider, I don't know how to term it, but not the best developers that I've worked with, in terms of that. Like, technically they're great. Everything else is not there and you don't want to work with them. So it's not just about the technical skills 100%. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense to me. Okay, cool. And then final question. Is where can people find you online? Where can they find out more about the book? Where can they find out about the Compose Kit, all that good stuff?
So I'm very active on Twitter. You can find me on Styl. That's my handle, which is STYL. Lately, I've been uploading those video clips, the screencasts that I mentioned earlier on YouTube. you're going to find them similar in the similar user handle, Styl, which is STYL. You can find the book on view2composable.com, which has the first part of the first chapter of the book, which is about text. And you can pre-order it from there and read everything. Any kind of question you might have is answered there. But if you need to reach me out for any way, please do so on Twitter. Like, tweet me or message me, and